Have you ever received a gift that just felt wrong? For my 8th birthday, my grandmother gave me a porcelain doll. It had these big, glassy blue eyes, rosy lips, and a delicate lace dress. It was an heirloom, she said, passed down from her mother. The moment I held it, a weird chill ran down my spine. It was that bone-deep feeling you get when something is just off. My parents, of course, just told me to say thank you and be polite. So I put it on the shelf right next to my bed. For years, that doll just sat there watching. It sounds crazy, but its eyes always seemed to follow me. No matter where I was in the room, I'd laugh it off, telling myself it was just a trick of the light, my imagination running wild. But then I turned 16, and things started getting weird, really weird. It began with little things. I'd wake up and find the doll turned slightly, facing the window instead of straight ahead. I figured my mum had been cleaning and moved it by accident. No big deal. But then, the next night, I heard this faint tapping sound. It was soft, but deliberate, coming from my dresser. I flipped on the light, and my heart just stopped. The doll wasn't on the shelf anymore. It was sitting on my desk, staring directly at my bed. I completely froze. I was the only one in that room. Nobody could have moved it without me hearing them. I tried to rationalize it, to calm myself down. I picked it up, put it back on the shelf, and tried to go to sleep. Let's just say I didn't get much rest that night. A week went by, and I started to think maybe I'd just been overtired. But then I came home from school one afternoon and found the doll lying on my pillow. Its tiny porcelain hand was resting on my blanket, almost like it had been waiting for me to get home. I immediately ran to my mum and asked if she'd been in my room. She just shook her head and said she hadn't touched that thing in years. My blood ran cold. That night I had the most terrifying dream. I was in a dark, shadowy room, and there were whispers all around me, voices I couldn't understand. In the middle of it all stood the doll. She was holding a broken piece of glass. She looked right up at me and said, in this soft, childish voice, "You took my place." And then she started to laugh. It was this horrible, high-pitched giggle that echoed and echoed until I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. The next morning, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was a tiny hairline crack on the doll's porcelain cheek-in, the exact same spot where she had touched her face in my dream. After that, things just spiraled. It was like a switch had been flipped. Objects in my room would move on their own. The lights would flicker randomly. My room always felt freezing cold, even with the heater blasting. It got to the point where I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see her, sitting straight up at the foot of my bed, her head tilted, just staring at me with those vacant eyes. Once, I swear, I heard her whisper something. It was this raspy, guttural sound, almost like a word trying to form. I couldn't take it anymore. I tried locking her in a box in my closet, but every single morning she'd be right back on the shelf, sitting in her usual spot as if nothing had happened. I was terrified. I begged my parents to get rid of her, to just throw her away. But they thought I was being overdramatic, that it was just teen angst or something. They didn't believe me, so I realized I had to do it myself. One night, I waited until everyone was asleep. I snuck out of the house, taking the doll with me to the woods behind our property. I found a big old oak tree and started digging. I buried her deep in the cold earth. As I shoveled the last bit of dirt over her face, I swear I heard a faint giggle carried on the wind. It sent shivers down my entire body, but I also felt a huge sense of relief. For a few days, everything was perfect. The house felt peaceful. I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. My room finally felt like my own again. I thought the nightmare was finally over. I was so wrong. On the 5th night, I was woken up by a sound that I will never, ever forget. It was the sound of tiny, deliberate footsteps scuttling across my wooden floorboards. My hand was shaking as I reached over and fumbled for my lamp switch. And when the light flickered on, my blood turned to ice. There she was, sitting at the end of my bed. Her laced dress was smeared with dirt and grime from the grave I'd put her in. The crack on her cheek was more visible now, like a tiny, jagged scar, and her eyes, her once glassy eyes, seemed darker, deeper, and somehow alive. I screamed. I don't think I've ever screamed like that before or since. I scrambled out of my bed and ran to my parents' room, sobbing hysterically. They rushed into my room, ready to confront whatever was there. But when they flipped on the main light, the doll was gone. They searched everywhere, under the bed, in the closet, all over the room. Nothing. My dad, bless his heart, even took a flashlight and went out to the woods. He found the spot where I'd buried her, right under the oak tree. The soil was freshly disturbed. The hole was empty. That night, I was too terrified to be alone. I slept on the floor in my parents' room, but I couldn't close my eyes. I had this suffocating feeling that something was in the room with us, watching. At around 3 a.m., I heard a soft thud, like something small rolling onto the floor. My mum must have heard it too, because she reached over and turned on her bedside lamp, and there it was, lying on the floor beside their bed, staring straight up at me with those cold, dead eyes. That was the last straw. The next morning, we burned it. My dad built a fire in the backyard pit, and I watched as the flames licked at her porcelain skin. I watched it crack, blacken, and melt, just before her face disappeared completely. I swear I saw her eyes move one last time, locking onto mine before they dissolved into ash. Years went by. I moved out, went to college, and started my own life. I did everything I could to leave that horror behind me, to convince myself it was all just a terrible, prolonged nightmare. But a few weeks ago, a package arrived in the mail. There was no return address, just my name, written in this delicate, old-fashioned handwriting. My hands were trembling as I opened it. Inside was a small porcelain hand. It was cracked, and the edges were blackened by fire. Tucked beside it was a note. It just said, "You forgot me. Now the nights are getting longer again." I've started hearing those faint tapping sounds. Sometimes I wake up with that same chilling feeling, that sense that someone is standing right beside my bed, just out of sight. I haven't seen her yet, but I know she's here, watching, waiting. Some family heirlooms carry more than just memories. Sometimes they carry souls, and they really, really don't like to be forgotten. Thanks for listening to my story. If you have any of your own chilling tales, I'd love to hear them in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there.